Hello those who mine and those who craft, it's me, finally back in Minecraft for the first time in a while. See, I've been working on a big project, which I have not so subtly mentioned like a bunch of times now. However, as I also mentioned, that's not gonna be done for a bit, because I elected to actually make other videos in the meantime while I slowly work on it. However, another thorn in my side while working on this project has been the nefarious pillagers. These crossbow-loving bums keep showing up to my house looking for loot, probably assuming I'm the average hardcore YouTuber just to find that my best gear is iron and I wear no armor because I think it looks bad. But that does not stop them from showing up over and over and over again. But to be fair, the area they're showing up in is pretty large, and they are living in this, the little itty-bitty outpost over to the west from my current project. Maybe they're just looking for a nicer place to stay. And so, in an attempt to appease them, not out of fear, just annoyance really, I decided I was going to make them a nicer place to bunk down, which of course starts with me applying a hex grid to my continent map. Why, you may ask? Well, because it gives me a good idea for how far I should have projects from each other, and should also help me not commit to an oversized project that fills 2 hexes. Again. This video's hex is going to be this one, which contains the most nearby pillager outpost, and so I assume, lore-wise, it is the one that keeps sending patrols out towards me up here. And going to take a peek at what they're working with, yeah, I would try and steal my house too. Just a kinda neat tower with a tent and some dummies. Well, that is solvable, I suppose. I just need to make them a nicer place to bunk down, right? One way to find out, I suppose, but first things first, after planning this all out of course, I need to collect all the materials I need to actually make the place. First is the 12,677 dirt I need for the terrain, which I have well more than enough of in this bag. After that is the 4,962 stone bricks I need, which is ever so slightly more difficult to obtain, but not terribly. I have plenty of cobblestone, and so first step out is to just separate out 4,962 of it from the bag I have it all in. Then, since this is a create world, even if that's not really the focus on this project, I can use a mechanical fan with some lava to cook all the cobble into regular stone, and then use a stone cutter to turn that stone into all the stone bricks I need. So, basically, it's easy. Then, 2,476 oak planks, which is just a decent cut from the oak logs I already have. So, not too bad. And now finally, an actually somewhat difficult thing to collect. 1,687 packed mud. Packed mud is made from mud and wheat, neither of which I really have. But the process to get them is not terribly complicated, just long. First step is just getting 1,687 dirt from my dirt bag and making some glass bottles. This is way too many glass bottles. After that, I can just bring my dirt out into the birch platforms of the big project, lay it out in long planes, and then use the bottles to imbue them with water, making them into mud. I probably could have made this much faster if I had used create mod stuff for this, but I kinda forgot to use the create mod for anything that was not cooking. So, bottles it is. It takes a casual hour, but with that, mud. After that though, I also need the same amount of wheat, which is a lot more annoying to get. Mostly because I've been growing pretty much exclusively potatoes and carrots, as I prefer them as a food source, and so my only wheat is lingering hay bales from mugging the villages when I first landed. I plant some wheat in my little farm and even use a few bones I had to speed it up a bit, but unless I plan on making this farm 10 times the size and automating it, this just will not do. So moving over to my outpost, I can run over to the almost suspicious amount of villages surrounding it and steal their hay bales. It'll take multiple villages to get all the hay bales, but fortunately for me, there are many. First village I got 35, which is respectable, and I for sure did not miss an entire pile in the center of the town. Second village I get 21 more, then so on and so forth until I have all of the 1,687 wheat, along with some extra bales which I'll need for later. With that, I just combine all the wheat and all of the mud, and I have all the packed mud I need. Instantly after that, I have another advanced dirt block, but this time it is coarse dirt, of which I need 1,655 of. I instantly assumed that this would be easy before realizing I have no gravel anywhere, which took me pretty off guard. I mean, surely I would have gravel somewhere on this continent in large amounts. But, heading into the mines, I managed to get all the gravel I needed pretty quick by just taking it from the walls of the old mine shafts. After that dirt block, we just have 1,615 cobblestone, which I have more than enough of. After that, substitution. See, I was going to say I needed 1,458 cut dripstone, but I do not have any dripstone nearby, have no idea where I got the dripstone that I do have, and do not know of any dripstone caves on this continent. So, instead of dripstone, I decide to use stripped logs instead. I, for a moment, consider using a type of terracotta, especially since I was already planning on using some of that elsewhere, but quickly realized that my only way to get clay was super boring and tedious, so I elected against it. And so, stripped logs. I was going to use jungle, but got scammed out of my one sapling and only got 30 logs. So, oak it is, which is much easier as I have plenty of saplings for those. I plant them in diagonal lines and just cut them down as they grow, so yeah. Pretty easy. After getting the logs, I just need to strip them, which leads to me placing these cubes of 64 logs in a grid on the flat area, and then I strip them and then rebag them, getting me my 1,458 stripped oak logs. Right after that is the 1,138 light gray terracotta I was going to use, but have now decided that clay is the worst, so instead I will replace it. We'll get to that later though. After that is 936 oak logs, which is just more of what we were literally just doing, just without taking their skin off. Or at least it would have been if I did not locate my bag of oak logs again, that I had apparently forgotten about between this point and making the oak planks, because I'm pretty sure I got the oak planks from this bag. So, that done also. Then, just a cool 722 stone, which again is not too bad since I have so much cobble in storage, followed instantly by gravel, which I'm pretty much out of. Again. After all, I had just used it to craft my coarse dirt, so I need more. I run back into the caves to locate more and get a decent amount, but after a while and not getting enough, I realize that I do not need to be down here doing this. Instead, I head out to my outpost iron farm, and just snatch gravel from this machine. Much easier and much faster, so yeah. Gravel. As it turns out, I did have a place on the continent with a ton of gravel. Wild. And yeah, after that, most of this stuff is super simple, so let's get right through it. 544 oak fences, that's just more oak wood, 530 stone brick stairs, cobblestone fire cut done, 359 grass blocks, that's just dirt with employment, 334 cobblestone slabs, cobblestone, 332 stone brick slabs, cobblestone again, then 318 torches, which the only even moderately interesting thing about the crafting of those is me making way too many. Specifically, I made just under 2,000 too many. So, you know, normal behavior. Then, 298 cobblestone, but wall-shaped this time. Also, 298 stone brick walls, which, again, cook cut done. The 283 oak planks and 260 oak stairs are, well, oak wood, so no issues there. Then 220 cobblestone but stair-shaped, and 206 barrels, which are easy to handle by just stopping by the Great Birch Farm in the middle of the birch platforms. Mossy stone bricks is at least a little interesting, but I do only need 198 of them, so of course I collect some moss that I got at some point, and some more excess dirt, as well as a bit of bone meal, and get all the moss I need. Then usual brick shuffle, combine, now they mossy. And I, the very smart and not brain-dead Goral I am, for sure, did not use all of my moss and forget to keep one as spare for possible later use. I'm so wise, I know. Then, back to easy stuff. 163 cracked stone bricks, which, for those who don't know, are just stone bricks that got put back in the oven again. Then, 99 white banners, which I do not make because A, not actually white banners, and B, that is more intended to be an apply-as-acquired kind of thing, as that's how many Pillager banners I had in the blueprint. Then, 100 wool, which I have a plan for. Instead of going on a sheep shearing quest, I just decide to run up to the other Pillager outpost and steal their tents, as well as the one tent at the Pillager outpost I actually care about for this episode. I also, for sure, do not die doing this due to that whole not wearing armor and not carrying a shield thing I'm a little too used to. I would never. But with all those tents stolen, that is my 100 white wool collected. Lastly, and by extension leastly, 50 dark oak fences, 24 carved pumpkins, 24 hay bales I already had, and 22 lanterns, which may have been annoying if I did not already have a monolith iron farm. So yeah, we good. And now, just like half an hour over the course of 3 trips back and forth from the house and the Pillager outpost, I have gathered all the stuff required to build this entire project into these chests nearby the Pillager outpost. Now, as I get ready to prep the build site, I will mention that I did at some point make and put on iron armor, but either was not recording or forgot to mention it. Either way, into the outpost to begin leveling out the land, starting by being almost immediately crossbowed down by this swarm of pillagers. But I would not die. Clearly. For real this time. I defeat them in combat and then begin tearing down the main outpost tower, as while it's kinda neat, it's in the way. Plus, it makes little to no sense logistically for them to have this much dark oak. After all, that stuff is pretty much all on the east coast, which of course is why I'm using mostly normal oak and stone, as those are much more local resources. I am, for some reason, attacked and nearly killed a few more times as I tear the place down. I mean, I'm making them a cool new place. Don't mind me taking their current home away without asking, that is clearly irrelevant to this situation. Also, don't mind me killing like more than a dozen of them. That was self-defense, so like, it's chill. I actually ended up running out of iron axes though, and had to run all the way back to the birch lane to make some more. Removing the tower is of course the main thing I did, but I also tear out the old tent posts and the scarecrows as I don't need those there either. And with that, and some dirt removal to level the area out a little bit better, the area is now prepped enough. So I can finally start working on making the place. If you've seen any of my previous videos, this is usually the part where I would just shut up and start running a building cinematic or something, but I'm not doing that this time for a couple reasons. A, this video already feels strangely short considering my last 4 have been around an hour long, and B, I feel like yapping more, especially since the Pillager menace is what made up like half the challenge of making this build. So, if the next clips are a little odd or the bright colored blocks and block hallucinations are a bit confusing, yeah, that's just how it is building with Lightmatica sometimes. But it helps make this stuff go by quite a bit faster and makes me not have to check some image like 90 times per block placed. So, very much worth it. The first thing I work on is clipping grass and setting down the dirt, building out the actual landscape everything will be set on. As I get this started, and right after caving in some Pillager, I do remember to check my current Pillager kill count, and it is currently 121, and I've been killed by them 3 times, so keep that in mind or something. Getting all the dirt in place takes the first about 50 minutes on its own, partially just due to the Pillager's harassment, but also it's just a lot of dirt. But as you can kinda see, this sets a decent base to work with from now on. So now, the actual build. The basic concept for this is that the Pillager group located an old ruin and moved into it. And so of course, the next step is making that old ruin. I have not fully decided what faction this ruin originally belonged to, as I'm really only familiar with 2 factions. One being the Northeast people, where I'm making that maybe oversized project, and Yonder, which is literally me. So I can decide/learn about that later, I guess. Also, yes, me having lore ideas is part of the reason I made the hex map. I do not intend to have a major build in every hex, but having this as a base to map out where different factions have influence should help me decide where certain builds should be. So, I'm kinda sorta treating this outpost as a sort of first use or test case for the hex map, as while not every hex will have an important location, probably, I think every hex should only have one major location, mostly to avoid clutter and to encourage me to build in more different locations. What will end up qualifying as a major location, I'm not sure yet, but that's my current concept for building out this continent. Anyway, actually about the build right here right now. I'm using stone bricks and stone to show where the old walls for the ruins were, and using cobblestones and gravel to show all the parts that have fallen down and become rubble. As these old walls are the main foundations the Pillagers found and built upon, having this look decent is important. And at least in my experience, having your ruin outlines have a little bit more of a wobbly vibe helps out a decent amount. Unless you have a very clear idea of what the ruin used to look like, in which case make it look like whatever that would be. And just kinda ruin it up a bit, I don't know. Also, I would like to say it was really not smart to not sleep at night. I did that for a couple reasons. A, I hoped it would make the replays come out better, which it kinda did, as it made it a little less flickery when I went to sleep. But also, B, which is honestly the original reason, is that it lets the normal night enemies take up the mob cap so there are less pillagers. However, I forgot one little detail on that. That means I gotta deal with the nighttime mobs, including the fuck-ass skeletons, which I hate. Like, pillagers are annoying, but the skeletons are everything they are but like 10 times worse. They shoot faster, they actually do something kinda resembling evasive footwork, and I'm like 90% sure the bony fucks are running some sort of incredible aimbot, because they do not be missing their shots like the pillagers are. Long story short, it was a mistake. You should just sleep at night, like, you know, a normal person would. Anyway, the first main segment I finish is the outer ruined wall. This was the main keep fella's out wall of this old fort, and they framed the whole build, and also run up the edge of this mountain, or more like tall hill, as there was an old lookout post up there. So I of course make sure to level it out a decent amount while I'm at it. Don't mind the gap in the floor, that will be important later. After that, and proving that phantoms really aren't all that, I begin work on the inner wall. I imagine this was probably the main keep, or like, fort of the fort. You know what I mean. This also provides a slightly higher up plinth inside of the ruin, and has much higher walls, even if they've also crumbled quite a bit over the years of neglect. However, despite all that, the main entry is still notable, as the arch is still at least mostly standing, and it has this small path leading up to it, which will of course act as the main entrance to this upper layer. Then, last before working on the pillagers' contribution to this area, who I still cannot hear without thinking of the legendary pull camera stream, I need a floor. Any old actual flooring is long gone, and is now just packed and well-worn dirt. I start with the packed mud blocks and follow up with coarse dirt, both of which go pretty quickly. Then also the cobblestone, which is mostly just near the walls where it fell down. But as I finish up with that, I again run out of food and have to take a break to go get more. But a stack of baked potatoes collected later, and I'm set to keep adding textured dirt to the floor. But for all those pass, let's make a stack of wooden shovels to deal with that. Again, the power of the compression bag is very grand. But first things first, we add the stripped oak logs in place of what was going to be dripstone, as dripstone sucks to get. Mostly because I couldn't locate a dripstone cave, so wood will do. I do my best to vary the orientation a decent amount so it doesn't look too regular, and I think it works, but it's kinda hard to tell while building due to the whole red overlay thing. Lightmatica is somewhat displeased by my substitution, it seems. Then, substitution 2 is replacing where I was going to use the light gray terracotta I was talking about before with path blocks, which leads to me offhanding dirt and main-handing a shovel to try and make this moderately quicker, and well, it works well enough. As for why I thought using light gray terracotta on a continent with no mesa and a severe lack of dripstone caves was a good idea, I will simply say the planning phase has a way of filling an individual with evil confidence. We do not speak with Planner Lucy, she's a little foolish. Could I have gotten that terracotta? Absolutely, but it would have required me to either dig around in rivers for longer than I would like to, or make a create farm or other create contraption, which, while neat in concept, I would prefer to do that as its own thing, so maybe another time. And with that floor in, I can build the stuff that goes on top of it, specifically starting with this side of the wall's rubble, as there should be rubble on both ends of the wall, methinks. This also includes the rubble around and inside the inner wall as well, and with that, this is the base of the build finished. Now to actually build the pillager part. First on the list, the pillager towers. These are pretty much reskins of the official pillager towers, as is most of the pillager set dressing, as I quite like them. However, as I kinda mentioned before, there is no dark oak anywhere near here, so I'm using normal oak wood. After all, the nearest dark oak, except the non-canon dark oak island that is being erased next to the big project, is like 6 hexes away, which sounds like a small amount until you remember that the hexes are kinda massive, and that is actually thousands of blocks away. So oakwood it is, because oakwood is canon for the region. Then, using normal stone and stone bricks, as it is pretty easy to get a lot of from just about anywhere. I imagine the classic gray stone is like the cheap and or easy to get rock for building, and the other stones are more region specific and by extension, much rarer to find outside of their region. Also, I would like to say as I'm getting to the top of this outpost tower, I did make all four corners of this roof symmetrical, so you're welcome or something. So, after that one, I do the northwest one, which is literally the exact same thing. But before working on the northeast tower too much, I do remember to fetch some barrels as I added a few to each tower. And then after a big fight with the pillagers again, I can continue work on the northeast tower, which again is the same thing as the other two. Tower 4 on the southeast corner is also the same tower, but it is a little special due to its location. Unlike the other three, which are just inside the outer wall, this fourth one is up on that hill I leveled off earlier, so it's a little further out and a little higher up than the others, probably making it a little better for looking out over the area, especially since it's quite hilly. But with those in place, the big dirt pen looks really empty, so I think we should fix that. First, I grab some oak fences, some hay bales and the carved pumpkins, and make some of the pillagers' favorite training dummy scarecrow things. After those, on the elevated middle segment, I add 5 tents, which are slightly more cozy than just sleeping on the open ground, I suppose. I have them all up here as this zone is a bit more fortified and therefore a bit safer to take naps in. Then we gotta add some of the classic pillager cages. I considered putting iron golems in them, but didn't end up doing it. I dot these around the lower layer, and also start filling in some of these big storage pallets. These use a lot of those barrels I made, as well as some oak wood to frame them, making these big storage boxes for any and all loot the pillagers have or have not obtained. I put a few of these big storage boxes as well as some log piles up on the top layer as well, as again, more fortified, and I think this is now a much more appropriately cluttered outpost. However, there is still one more thing to do. See, the pillagers don't have as much issues with the creatures of the night as they are much better armed than their villager counterparts, but they still probably do not prefer them in their camp or really anywhere near it. So adding some of those torches and lanterns around the area is also a pretty important thing to do. As with most builds I do, I make sure to put down lighting so that there should be no area within the build that can spawn mobs, so the pillagers can rest a little bit easier. Also, yeah, using the schematic verifier to find exactly where to put all the torches and lanterns looks a little interesting. But it works, so it works, and before long the outpost is lit up and safe. For the pillagers, at least. They still dislike me, though, for some reason, and keep trying to kill me. Also, as a quick note, I did have to run back to get more food midway through this, as going even a few minutes without food in the pillager outpost is not generally preferred. It is finally done, though. Besides for the more ominous banners I will probably add in the future, this is all there is. And I think it turned out pretty nice. So now I will be doing the building and showcase cinematic, since you asked nicely, or something like that. Well, with that done, it is finally over. I would start yapping, but pretty much all I have to say is that the next video I want to do is probably another Factorio video, since it has been a little bit. But that will be for next time, so as usual, farewell. Oh, you ungrateful fuck!